Three siblings set sail, but never returned, vanishing without a trace as if swallowed whole by the vast waters off the Australian coast. But a dozen years later, their grief-stricken father makes a truly haunting discovery, finally uncovering the chilling truth about what really happened to them. The small, picturesque coastal town of Derby, Australia, was bathed in the comforting warmth of the midday sun as Michael Miller stepped out of his modest, weatherboard house. At 58, his face bore the deep, etched creases of a man who had endured far more than his fair share of life's cruelties and heartbreaks. His eyes, once sparkling with optimism and a zest for life, had visibly dulled over the long years, perpetually clouded by the heavy fog of alcohol and unrelenting grief. Going to drown yourself in another bottle, are you? Sarah Miller's sharp voice sliced through the otherwise still air from the doorway behind him. Her tone was jagged, edged with 12 long years of accumulated resentment and unspoken frustrations. Michael didn't turn around, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Leave it, Sarah. Just leave it. That's all you ever do, Michael. Leave everything. Leave it all to me while you waste our hard-earned money getting drunk at all hours." Sarah stepped fully onto the porch, her worn work uniform already donned, ready for her demanding shift at the local restaurant. At 56, she carried herself with a rigid, almost brutal dignity, her hair pulled back severely from a face that had once softened considerably at the mere sight of him. "I'm not doing this now," Michael muttered, his voice low as he continued down the worn path toward the street. "Of course not. You're never doing anything except feeling sorry for yourself," Sarah called after his retreating figure, her voice rising. "It's been 12 years, Michael. 12 long, agonizing years. I'm grieving too, but I didn't turn into a pathetic drunk." Michael whirled around then, his face flushed with a sudden surge of anger and pain. "You think I don't know how long it's been? Every single day, Sarah, every single damn day, I wake up and remember they're gone. And you think I don't?" Sarah's voice cracked, a momentary fissure in her hardened exterior. "But I still get up. I still go to work. I still live." Michael gestured dismissively between them, encompassing the palpable tension and distance. "This isn't living. This is barely surviving." "Then survive. Be a man and get some work," Sarah snapped, her patience finally shattering. "Stop wasting the money I earned cleaning up after messy tourists and feeding drunks just like you." Michael simply waved her off, turning away again. As he trudged heavily down the path, he heard the front door slam violently behind him, the force rattling the window panes. The sound was so familiar, so routine, it barely registered anymore. He felt the accusatory eyes of neighbors on him as he walked. Mrs. Peterson, tending her garden, deliberately avoided his gaze. The Collins family abruptly hushed their conversation as he passed by. "What are you all looking at?" Michael called out suddenly, his voice unexpectedly louder than intended, laced with bitterness. "Enjoying the show, are you?" Mrs. Peterson quickly retreated indoors, while Mr. Collins muttered something unintelligible to his wife before guiding her inside as well. Michael knew they all pitied him. The tragic father whose 3 beloved children had vanished without a trace on a simple sailing trip 12 long years ago. In a town this small, this interconnected, everyone knew everyone else's business, and his family's profound tragedy had been the somber talk of Derby for that first, agonizing year. Now, it was just a sad, faded footnote, a cautionary tale whispered by parents to their children about the inherent dangers lurking along the rugged Kimberley coast. As he walked the familiar, well-trodden route to his regular bar, the Bobe Tree, Michael's mind inevitably drifted back to the unsatisfying words of Detective Angus Marr when the case had officially gone cold after a mere 6 months. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Miller, but we've exhausted all available leads," Marr had said, his gaze not quite meeting Michael's own. "These waters, they can be treacherous. Sudden storms, powerful currents. It's most likely the boat capsized and, well, nature took its course." Michael had punched a hole clean through the police station wall that day. It had earned him a night locked in the cells and, crucially, hadn't brought his children back. Now, As he approached the familiar facade of the Bogue Tree, he found the doors unexpectedly locked and the lights off. A small, handwritten sign in the window read, "Monday, open from 4 p.m." Bloody hell, Michael muttered under his breath, running a weary hand through his thinning gray hair. He'd forgotten what day it was. Again, the drinks were already blurring together, days melting into nights, nights into indistinct days. He turned toward the harbor instead, his thoughts shifting to the Anchor, another bar known for opening earlier. His mind wandered aimlessly as he walked, inevitably remembering the very last time he'd seen his children. David, 25, confident and brimming with his father's own adventurous spirit. Emily, 22, serious, thoughtful, and deeply observant. And Jessica, 20, still carrying the bright, infectious sunshine of youth in her radiant smile. "Make sure you're back for dinner," he called out jovially as they'd headed down toward the bustling docks, David leading his sisters with that characteristic, slightly cocky grin of his. "Your mother's making her special roast. We'll be back before sunset, Dad." David had promised cheerfully, his favorite holiday, hat pulled low over his eyes. Just a quick sail around the bay. They never came back. Michael's somber reminiscing had led him astray, and he suddenly realized he'd taken a wrong turn. Instead of approaching the Anchor, he found himself near a small, secluded stretch of beach where a weathered fisherman's cabin stood, partially hidden by low, scrubby coastal vegetation. Something about the dilapidated cabin sparked a flicker of recognition. Michael narrowed his eyes, watching as a man worked intently outside, meticulously mending what looked like fishing nets. The man appeared to be in his mid-30s, deeply tanned and lean from years spent outdoors. With a sudden jolt, Michael realized who it was. One of David's closest friends, a young man named Kevin who had often come to their house for dinner, sometimes even staying over when his own difficult home situation had become unbearable. For some inexplicable reason, this particular young man had never come forward during the extensive search for his children. He'd never offered help, shared any potential information, or even attended the heartbreaking memorial service they'd held a year after the disappearance. How incredibly strange, Michael thought, that he had never consciously noted this significant absence until this very moment. Michael hesitated for a moment, then decided to approach. The man was deeply focused on his task, completely unaware of Michael's presence until he knocked gently on one of the weathered wooden support posts of the cabin's small, rickety porch. The man looked up sharply, surprise flashing across his tanned face, quickly followed by something else, something that looked unsettlingly like raw fear. "I'm sorry," Michael began, struggling momentarily to recall the young man's name. You're David's friend, aren't you?" I can't seem to remember your name." "Kevin," the man replied after a pause that stretched just a fraction too long, amplifying the sudden tension in the air. "Kevin Riley." "Kevin, right?" Michael repeated, the name unlocking a cascade of associated memories. "Sorry about that. My manners, they aren't what they used to be." He tentatively extended his hand. "Been a long time." Kevin wiped his damp palm awkwardly on his shorts before taking Michael's offered hand in a grip that was neither firm nor particularly welcoming. "It has," he agreed tersely. Michael noticed how Kevin's eyes darted nervously past him, as if anxiously looking for someone else. "I was heading to the bar," Michael explained, gesturing vaguely back the way he had come. "But I think I got turned around somehow. Ended up here instead." "The Anchor's that way," Kevin pointed vaguely, avoiding eye contact. "About a 5-minute walk." "Right. Thanks." Michael knew he should have left then, turned, and walked away, but something inexplicable held him there. I was just thinking about David. You two were close, weren't you? Used to come around for dinner practically once a week." Kevin's posture visibly stiffened. "Yeah," he conceded. "We were good mates." "Funny," Michael pressed gently, a nascent suspicion beginning to form. "I don't recall seeing you around after what happened." Kevin looked profoundly uncomfortable, shifting his weight restlessly from one foot to the other. It was hard. For everyone. An awkward, heavy silence settled between them, thick with unspoken words. Then, Much to Kevin's apparent surprise, Michael nodded toward the cabin door. Mind if I come in for a bit? It's been a while since we caught up, and honestly, I could use a good chat. Kevin hesitated noticeably, then finally nodded curtly. Yeah, sure. As Kevin led the way inside, Michael couldn't shake the growing, unsettling feeling that something was profoundly wrong here. Kevin was far too nervous, too stilted and unnatural for this to be a simple, albeit somber, reunion between a grieving father and his missing son's old friend. The interior of Kevin's cabin was sparsely furnished, but surprisingly neat. A worn, threadbare couch sat against one wall. A small, mismatched wooden table with 2 chairs occupied the center of the modest room, and a compact kitchenette took up one corner. The confined space smelled strongly of salt, fish, and stale coffee. Have a seat, Kevin said, gesturing toward one of the chairs. Michael settled onto it, the aging wooden frame creaking ominously under his weight. He watched intently as Kevin went through the familiar motions of making coffee, his movements precise yet undeniably tense, like a man performing under intense, unwelcome surveillance. So, Michael began, attempting to ease the strained, palpable atmosphere. You've been living here long? About 10 years, Kevin replied, keeping his back turned to Michael as he spooned ground coffee into a battered, old percolator. Bought this place cheap after working on the fishing boats for a while. Good life, is it? Living by the sea? Simple? Quiet. Kevin's answers were clipped, terse, offering no natural invitation for further conversation. Michael tried again, pressing gently. Must have been hard for you too, losing David like that. You two were inseparable back then. Kevin's shoulders hunched slightly, defensively. Like I said, he repeated stonily, it was hard for everyone. Strange, though, Michael persisted, unable to let it go. Everyone else who knew David came forward during the search. His school friends, his workmates, even that girl he dated for only 2 weeks when he was 16. Everyone except you. The percolator began to bubble noisily on the small stove, conveniently giving Kevin an excuse to remain silent as he focused intently on pouring the steaming coffee into 2 chipped mugs. He placed one carefully in front of Michael before finally sitting down across from him, his own mug held tightly between both hands, as if seeking warmth despite the room's mild temperature. I wasn't in a good place back then, Kevin finally said, his voice low and hesitant. Didn't know what to say, how to help in a meaningful way. Michael nodded slowly, taking a tentative sip of the strong, bitter coffee. As he set the mug down, his gaze drifted idly to a small wooden cabinet against the far wall. On top sat a framed photograph that immediately caught his attention. Michael squinted, then rose deliberately from his seat to get a closer look. It was a photo of his 3 children beaming on a sailboat. David sat on the left, easily recognizable by his signature holiday hat and wide, infectious grin, one arm slung comfortably around Emily, who was in the center, vibrant in a red sundress. Jessica sat to Emily's right, her bright, joyful smile matching the others. All 3 of them caught perfectly mid-laughter by the camera's lens. Michael's heart clenched painfully in his chest. He knew that boat intimately. It was the very one they had vanished on 12 years ago. Where did you get this? Michael asked, his voice suddenly hoarse, thick with emotion. Kevin remained seated, his knuckles showing white around his coffee mug. David gave it to me. No. Michael picked up the frame, studying the image closely, his mind racing. This was taken the day they disappeared. Look at what they're wearing. These are the exact same clothes they were reported missing in. He turned slowly to face Kevin, his eyes demanding the truth. Were you there that day? Kevin's eyes flickered nervously toward the door, then reluctantly back to Michael. I took the picture. You? Michael set the frame down carefully, a chilling coldness settling deep in his stomach. You were with them when they disappeared. Kevin said nothing, but his breathing had become rapid and shallow. 12 years, Michael said, his voice dangerously quiet, vibrating with suppressed fury. 12 agonizing years I've been living in hell, not knowing what happened to my children. And you were there? You saw what happened? And you never said a single word? It's not like that, Kevin protested weakly, his voice barely audible. Michael crossed the small room in 2 long strides, grabbing Kevin roughly by the collar and yanking him forcefully to his feet. Coffee splashed across the table as Kevin's mug toppled over. "Then what is it like?" Michael growled, his face mere inches from Kevin's, radiating palpable menace. "Tell me. Tell me now, or I swear to God, I'll drag you to the police station myself." "You don't understand," Kevin gasped, surprisingly not resisting Michael's tight grip. They'll kill me if I talk." "Who will? Who are they?" Michael demanded, shaking him slightly. Kevin's resistance finally crumbled completely. "Let me go," he pleaded, "and I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything." Michael released him abruptly with a rough shove, and Kevin stumbled backward, bumping against the wall. For a tense moment, Michael thought the younger man might make a desperate run for it, but instead, Kevin sank heavily back into his chair, burying his head in his trembling hands. "It started about 6 months before they disappeared," Kevin began, his voice barely above a strained whisper. "David and I, we had a deal with some Indonesian fishermen. They'd drop packages offshore, and we'd pick them up in the sailboat and take them to Hidden Reef Cay. Someone would meet us there to collect them." "What kind of packages?" Michael asked tightly, though a sickening suspicion already churned in his gut. "Drugs," Kevin admitted, finally looking up, his eyes filled with shame. "Smuggled in from Indonesia. They were destined for some biker gangs, right here in Derby. But the handoff, the actual exchange, always happened out at the Cay." Michael's fists clenched hard at his sides, his knuckles turning white. You got my son involved in drug smuggling." Kevin looked up again, a fleeting flash of defiance crossing his features. "It wasn't me. David was the one who knew the bikers. He approached me because I had the sailing experience. He asked me to teach him, said there was good, easy money in it." Michael shook his head vehemently, unwilling, unable to believe it. Not his son. Not his good, adventurous, responsible boy. He couldn't have been involved in something so dangerous, so inherently illegal. "You're lying." "I'm not," Kevin insisted, his voice gaining a sliver of conviction. "David was smart, yeah, but he got greedy. We've been doing the runs for months, without any problems. The money was good, really, really good. But that last day," he trailed off, swallowing hard, the memory clearly painful. "What happened that last day?" Michael demanded, his voice taut. "David, he brought his sisters along," Kevin said, raw regret etched deeply into his features. "I told him not to. I told him it was too risky, especially dealing with the kind of people we were involved with. But he insisted it would be fine, said they'd just swim and enjoy the sun at the Cay while he did the handoff quickly. Said they wouldn't suspect a thing." Michael felt physically sick. The thought of David deliberately, recklessly endangering Emily and Jessica was almost too much to bear. "And then," Michael prompted huskily. I don't know exactly what went down that day," Kevin continued, avoiding Michael's gaze again. "I left early, with the sailboat, heading back to the mainland alone. David asked me to come back and pick them all up at 3 in the afternoon, said they'd spend a few hours relaxing at the Cay. But you never went back for them," Michael stated flatly, realization dawning with horrifying clarity. Kevin shook his head miserably. "Before I could, 2 of the gang members, they showed up at my place. They knew where I lived. They told me that my friends didn't need picking up. And when I asked what that meant, they told me not to ask too many questions unless I wanted to end up joining them. And you just accepted that?" Michael's voice rose sharply in disbelief. "You didn't go to the police? You didn't even try to find out what happened to them?" "I was scared," Kevin exclaimed, his voice cracking. "These weren't just ordinary criminals, Michael. These were dangerous people, ruthless, with connections everywhere. When I heard the news about the disappearance, I just knew it had something to do with the deliveries and the gang. I wanted to come forward, I swear I did, but they made it crystal clear what would happen to me if I ever talked." Michael stared hard at Kevin, the man who had once been welcomed into his home, who had eaten at his table, who had been treated almost like another son. Now, all he saw was a coward, a man who had valued his own safety above the precious lives of 3 young people. "You let my children disappear," Michael said, his voice trembling uncontrollably with a potent mixture of rage and profound grief. "You let us suffer, agonize for 12 long years, not knowing if they were alive or dead. Well, you've just been living here. What? Fishing? Pretending nothing ever happened?" "I'm sorry," Kevin whispered, his eyes glistening with tears. "I was young and stupid and so incredibly scared. And now you're older, but still just a mute," Michael snapped contemptuously. "Sorry won't bring my children back." His eyes landed on a half-empty bottle of beer sitting on Kevin's kitchen counter, and he snatched it up without a second thought. "You're pathetic." As Michael moved decisively toward the door, Kevin scrambled to his feet. "Please, Michael, don't go to the police. If you do, they'll know I told you something. They'll come after me." "Should have thought of that 12 years ago," Michael replied coldly, his voice devoid of any sympathy. "You're a coward, Kevin Riley. A goddamn coward." With that final, damning pronouncement, Michael yanked open the flimsy door and stepped back out into the harsh sunlight, leaving Kevin standing utterly alone in the middle of his small cabin, surrounded by the wreckage of his long-buried secrets. Michael walked away from Kevin's cabin, his mind reeling violently from the devastating revelations. The beer bottle, gripped tightly in his hand, was a familiar, albeit destructive, comfort, and he twisted off the cap without hesitation, taking a long, deep pull of the lukewarm liquid. One bottle wouldn't make him properly drunk, not anymore, but might just take the sharpest edge off the overwhelming rage and sickening disbelief coursing fiercely through his veins. David, his son, his responsible, ambitious, promising son, had been involved in drug smuggling. It seemed utterly impossible, inconceivable, yet it explained so much in retrospect. The sudden, unexplained influx of cash David had vaguely claimed came from various odd jobs, the increasingly secretive phone calls late at night, the frequent, unexplained absences he'd brushed off. And now, after 12 long years of torturously believing his children had simply been tragic victims of the sea's unpredictable cruelty, Michael was confronted with the horrifying possibility that they might have been victims of calculated human malice instead. He needed to tell Sarah. Immediately. Whatever their considerable problems, their fractured relationship, she deserved to know the truth, the whole ugly truth about their children. Michael fumbled for his worn mobile phone and dialed her number, but the call went straight to voicemail. "Damn it," he muttered, suddenly remembering she was still at work. Sarah had taken a job as a kitchen hand at the Perler, an upscale restaurant catering primarily to wealthy tourists, shortly after the children disappeared. It had started as a desperate way to keep busy during the endless, agonizing days of waiting for news. Any news then became an absolute necessity as Michael's drinking worsened significantly and his own carpentry work steadily dried up. Michael changed course abruptly, heading purposefully toward the restaurant instead of toward home. The Perler was situated on the opposite side of town, facing the picturesque harbor where affluent visitors often docked their impressive yachts. As he walked briskly, Michael mentally rehearsed what he would possibly say to Sarah. How could he possibly tell her that their beloved son had been involved in something so incredibly dangerous, so illegal, that he might have inadvertently, carelessly, led his own sisters directly into mortal danger? The restaurant was bustling with the typical lunchtime rush when Michael arrived. Through the large, clean front windows, he could see waiters dressed in crisp white shirts moving efficiently between the packed tables. He pushed open the heavy glass door and was immediately met by a polite, smiling hostess. "Good afternoon, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "I need to speak with Sarah Miller," Michael stated bluntly, forgoing pleasantries. "She works in the kitchen. It's important. Family business." The hostess's professional smile faltered slightly. "I'm afraid staff aren't usually available during peak service hours, sir. Perhaps you could come back after." "This can't wait," Michael interrupted firmly. "Just tell her Michael's here." "Sir, I really can't disturb the kitchen during. It's about our children," Michael insisted, his voice rising loud enough that several nearby diners glanced over curiously. The restaurant manager quickly appeared at the hostess's side, a tall, imposing man with a carefully trimmed beard and concerned, watchful eyes. "Is there a problem here, sir?" I need to see my wife, Michael repeated forcefully. Sarah Miller. It's urgent. The manager frowned disapprovingly. Mr. Miller, we're right in the middle of lunch service. Whatever it is, surely it can wait an hour or two. No, it can't. Michael insisted, his already frayed patience wearing dangerously thin. 12 years. 12 years we've been waiting. I'm not waiting another hour. The manager looked like he was about to argue further when Sarah herself appeared unexpectedly in the doorway leading to the kitchen, wiping her hands distractedly on her apron. She must have heard the commotion. Michael, her expression was a complex mixture of annoyance and underlying concern. What on earth are you doing here? I need to talk to you, he said urgently. Now. Sarah glanced quickly at the manager, who sighed heavily and nodded reluctantly. 10 minutes, Sarah. We're absolutely swamped back there. This way, she said curtly to Michael, leading him briskly to a small, cluttered staff break area at the back of the restaurant. Once they were finally alone, she crossed her arms defensively over her chest. If you're drunk again, Michael, I swear. I'm not drunk, he cut in sharply, holding up the nearly empty beer bottle as evidence. One beer, that's all. And that's not what this is about. Sarah's eyes narrowed suspiciously, taking in his visibly agitated state. Then what? What was so desperately important that you had to come barging into my workplace like this? Michael took a deep, steadying breath. I found out, he said, his voice low but intense. I found out what happened to the kids. Sarah's arms dropped abruptly to her sides, her face instantly paling. What? How? When? I ran into Kevin Riley today, Michael explained quickly. David's friend. Remember him? The fishing kid who used to come over for dinner all the time. Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving Michael's face, searching for the truth. He was there, Sarah. He was with them the day they disappeared. Michael went on to tell her everything Kevin had confessed. The drug smuggling, David's shocking involvement, the menacing biker gang, and Kevin's subsequent 12 years of cowardly silence. As he spoke, Sarah's expression transformed rapidly from stunned shock to utter disbelief, and finally, to a deep, visceral, soul-crushing pain. By the time he finished recounting the horrifying story, she had sunk heavily onto a nearby plastic chair, her hand pressed tightly against her mouth as if to stifle a sob. No, she whispered, her voice trembling. Not David. He wouldn't do something like that. He wouldn't put his sisters in danger. That's exactly what I thought too, Michael said softly, his own pain evident. But makes sense, Sarah. Think about it. The new clothes he suddenly had, the unexplained cash he always seemed to possess, those secretive sailing trips that got more and more frequent. Tears welled instantly in Sarah's eyes, spilling silently down her cheeks. If this is true, if David was involved in drug smuggling and something went terribly wrong, then they might not be lost at sea. They might be. She couldn't bring herself to finish the horrifying sentence. We need to go to the police, Michael said firmly, his resolve hardening. Right now. Tell them exactly what Kevin told me. They can reopen the case. Sarah stood abruptly, determination flashing in her tear-filled eyes. I'm coming with you. Let me just talk to my manager. She disappeared back into the bustling restaurant, returning only minutes later, having quickly changed out of her kitchen uniform and into her street clothes. He's not happy about it, she reported grimly, but he understands. Family emergency. Together, they left the parlor and began the somber walk toward the police station. As they neared their own modest home, which lay directly on the route, Michael took out his phone again and tried to call Detective Marr, the officer who had initially handled their children's case all those years ago. The call went straight to voicemail once more. No answer. Michael reported unnecessarily, slipping the phone back into his pocket. As they approached their familiar weatherboard house, Michael noticed something immediately odd. The front door was slightly ajar, the wood around the lock splintered, clearly indicating it had been forced open. Did you leave the door open? Michael asked, his voice suddenly tense. Sarah shook her head definitively. No, and I definitely didn't break the lock. They approached the house, cautiously, scanning the quiet street. The neighborhood was eerily quiet in the early afternoon, most residents presumably away at work. Michael pushed the door open wider, stepping hesitantly into the familiar living room. Nothing appeared overtly disturbed at first glance. The worn furniture was all in its usual place. Michael's reading glasses still sat on the side table, where he'd left them that very morning. But then subtle signs emerged that someone unwelcome had indeed been there. Faint, muddy shoe prints on the polished wooden floor, prints clearly too large to belong to either Michael or Sarah, and the door to their bedroom standing wide open, when Sarah always meticulously kept it closed during the day. "Someone's been in our house," Sarah whispered, clutching Michael's arm tightly. Should we call the police now?" Before Michael could answer, she was already moving instinctively toward the bedroom, drawn by a powerful maternal instinct to check if anything had been disturbed in what had once been their children's rooms, rooms preserved carefully over the years like sacred shrines to their cherished memory. "Michael, come here, quickly," Sarah called out, her voice tight with sudden, palpable fear. Michael hurried anxiously to the bedroom, his heart pounding erratically in his chest. Sarah stood frozen at the foot of their bed, pointing a trembling finger at something that definitely hadn't been there when they'd left the house that morning. A plain, rectangular package wrapped crudely in brown paper, and a stark white envelope placed neatly, almost deliberately, on top of their quilt. "Don't touch it," Michael warned sharply, approaching the bed slowly, cautiously. "We don't know what it is." Sarah wrapped her arms tightly around herself, shivering uncontrollably despite the warmth of the day. Who would break into our house just to leave a package? And why today of all days? Michael's mind raced, connecting the dots with alarming speed. It couldn't possibly be a coincidence that someone had forcibly entered their home on the very same day he had confronted Kevin about the children's disappearance. "Kevin," Michael muttered grimly. "Kevin must have called someone after I left. Told them I knew about the drug smuggling." "But who?" Sarah asked, bewildered. After 12 long years, who would care enough to break in now? Michael reached decisively for the envelope, ignoring Sarah's frightened protest. He tore it open hastily and pulled out a single sheet of plain white paper. The message was typed starkly in plain black font. "We know what you know. Keep it to yourself. Don't go to the police, or there will be serious consequences." Michael handed the ominous note to Sarah, who read it with widening, terrified eyes. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're still out there. The people who took our children, they're still out there, and now they know we're onto them." Michael turned his attention grimly to the package itself. It was roughly the size of a shoebox, wrapped simply in brown paper and sealed securely with heavy packing tape. Something about its very presence sent an icy chill down his spine. "We should call the police," Sarah insisted urgently. "Right now. Let them handle this. What if it's dangerous?" But Michael was already reaching for the package, his simmering anger overriding his caution. "Michael, please," Sarah pleaded desperately. "Don't open it. We don't know what it is." Michael hesitated for a fleeting moment, looking at his wife's genuinely frightened face. Then he thought again of David, Emily, and Jessica, of 12 long, agonizing years without knowing their fate. His resolve hardened instantly. "If these are the people who took our children," he said grimly, his voice low and determined, "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." He went quickly to the kitchen and returned moments later with a small utility knife. Before Sarah could protest further, he sliced decisively through the thick tape and peeled back the brown paper wrapping. Inside was a solid, plastic-wrapped brick of white powder. "What the—" Michael stared at it in utter confusion. Sarah gasped audibly. Is that what I think it is?" Michael carefully cut a tiny slit in the plastic wrap and touched the very tip of his finger to the fine powder. He brought it cautiously to his tongue, then quickly spat, the bitter taste confirming his suspicion. "Cocaine, I think. Or maybe heroin. Something like that." Sarah backed away instinctively from the bed, her eyes wide with fear. "Why? Why would they leave drugs in our house? What is this? Some kind of sick, twisted joke?" Michael's mind worked furiously, piecing together the sinister implications. "No," he said slowly, "it's not a joke. It's a message, and it's a trap. He carefully rewrapped the package. Think about it, Sarah. If we go to the police now, we're the ones caught holding a kilo of illegal drugs. Who's going to believe our story that someone broke in just to plant it here? Sure, there's evidence of the break-in, those shoe prints, but let's be honest, I've got a certain reputation in this town. Most folks already see me as nothing more than the local drunk. So what do? Sarah asked, her voice trembling uncontrollably. These people, whoever they are, they broke into our home. They know where we live. They're watching us. I think this is a show of power, Michael concluded grimly, pacing the small bedroom restlessly, running a hand distractedly through his already disheveled hair. We can't keep this here. If anyone found it, we'd be arrested immediately. But we can't just throw it away either, Sarah pointed out logically. What if someone else finds it? Or what if it's some kind of test? What if they're watching right now? Wait and see what we do with it. Michael stopped pacing abruptly, his decision made. We take it to the police. Tonight. We tell them everything about Kevin, about the break-in, about this threatening note. We bring the drugs as evidence. But the note, the consequences, Sarah reminded him fearfully. What more can they possibly take from us, Sarah? Michael asked bitterly, his voice raw with pain. They already took our children. Sarah was silent for a long, tense moment, her eyes fixed intently on the ominous package lying on their bed. Finally, she nodded slowly, her expression resolute. Okay, we go to the police. But we go now. Not tonight. I'm not staying in this house another minute longer, knowing they can just get in whenever they want. Michael agreed wholeheartedly. He found a reusable shopping bag in the kitchen and carefully placed a wrapped drug package inside. As they prepared quickly to leave, Sarah went purposefully to her closet and took out an old, heavy metal box. She unlocked it carefully and removed a small, snub-nosed revolver. Dad's old gun, she explained quietly, seeing Michael's surprised expression. I've kept it loaded, just in case. You know how to use that thing? Michael asked, eyeing the weapon wearily. Dad taught me, Sarah replied grimly, slipping the gun securely into her purse. Let's just hope I don't have to prove it. They left the violated house together, Michael carrying the bag containing the drugs, Sarah clutching her purse tightly, protectively. Their car, an old, battered Toyota that had certainly seen better days but still ran reliably, was parked in the driveway. Michael carefully stowed the incriminating bag in the trunk, and they both got in quickly, instinctively scanning the quiet, seemingly deserted street for any sign of surveillance. Straight to the police station, Michael said firmly as he started the engine. No stops, no detours. Sarah nodded silently, her knuckles white as she gripped her purse tightly in her lap. As they pulled away from the house, neither of them spoke. The immense weight of what they were carrying, both physically and emotionally, pressed down heavily upon them, creating a tense, suffocating silence that filled the small car. They had driven about halfway to the police station when flashing blue and red lights suddenly appeared, blindingly bright, in their rearview mirror. A police cruiser was signaling insistently for them to pull over. What now? Michael muttered under his breath, easing the aging car carefully to the curb. It's probably just a routine check, Sarah said, though her voice betrayed her underlying nervousness. Stay calm. Two uniformed officers approached the car briskly, one on each side. The taller one, on Michael's side, tapped sharply on the window. License and registration, please, he requested formally after Michael rolled down the window partway. Michael fumbled anxiously in the glove compartment for the necessary papers while trying to explain simultaneously. Officer, we're actually on our way to the police station right now. We have something extremely important to report. The officer, whose name badge read Reeves, raised a skeptical eyebrow. Is that so? And what exactly would that be? Before Michael could decide how much to reveal at that moment, the second officer, whose badge identified him as Torres, spoke calmly from Sarah's side of the car. Sir, ma'am, would you mind if we take a quick look in your vehicle? We've had some reports of suspicious activity in this particular area recently. Michael exchanged a worried, uncertain glance with Sarah. I'm not sure that's really necessary, officers. If you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem, should it? Officer Reeves interrupted smoothly, his tone hardening almost imperceptibly. Reluctantly, feeling they had no real choice, Michael agreed. They stepped out of the car, and Officer Reeves immediately asked for the keys to open the trunk. Michael's heart sank sickeningly as the officer inevitably discovered the shopping bag and pulled out the wrapped package of drugs. Well, 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 what do we have here? Reeves whistled softly, showing the package pointedly to Torres. That's not ours. Michael quickly explained, his voice rising in desperation. Someone broke into our house and left it there, along with a threatening note. We were taking it directly to the station as evidence. There's been a major development in our children's disappearance case. Sarah added urgently. They went missing 12 years ago. We need to speak with Detective Angus Marr immediately. The officers exchanged a significant, unreadable look that Michael couldn't interpret. Detective Marr, you say? Officer Torres repeated slowly, thoughtfully. That's interesting. Look, we can explain everything back at the station, Sarah interjected pleadingly. We have strong reason to believe our children were abducted by dangerous drug smugglers. Officer Reeves carefully rewrapped the package of drugs and placed it back inside the trunk. I think it would be best if you followed us, he said, his tone suddenly, inexplicably, more conciliatory. Detective Marr isn't actually at the station right now, but we could take you directly to him. He's expecting you. He is? Michael asked, genuinely surprised. We'll call ahead, Torres assured them smoothly. Just follow our patrol car, and we'll get this all sorted out quickly. Michael and Sarah returned uneasily to their own car, both deeply unsettled by the officer's abrupt change in demeanor. Something feels wrong, Michael, Sarah whispered anxiously as they pulled out slowly behind the patrol car. How would they know to contact, more specifically? And why not just escort us directly to the station? I don't know, Michael admitted grimly, keeping his eyes fixed intently on the police car ahead. But maybe Mars still has some connection to the case. Maybe they know something we don't. As they drove, Sarah discreetly took a quick photo of the patrol car's license plate with her phone. Just in case, she explained quietly when Michael shot her a questioning look. The police car led them away from the familiar route to the station, turning instead into a quiet residential area Michael didn't recognize. They continued down increasingly deserted streets until they reached a rather desolate neighborhood on the far outskirts of town. The patrol car finally stopped abruptly in front of a nondescript, single-story house set far back from the road, surrounded by overgrown, untrimmed bushes. There were no other houses nearby, just empty, neglected lots overgrown with tall weeds. That's definitely not Marr's house, Michael stated firmly, his suspicion now escalating into full-blown alarm. I know where he lives, or at least where he used to live, in the Bayside development. This isn't it. You're right, Sarah agreed, her voice tight with fear. I saw him at the market near there once. The patrol car stopped, and the two officers stepped out casually. Michael remained tensely in their car, engines still running, hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Michael, Sarah whispered urgently, I think we need to leave. Now, I have a very, very bad gut feeling about this. Before Michael could react, the officers approached again, one on each side of their car. Michael cracked his window, open only slightly this time. Is this Detective Marr's house? He asked, already knowing the answer, playing for time. Get out of the car, Mr. Miller. Officer Reeve commanded sharply, his previously friendly demeanor completely gone now, replaced by cold menace. Both of you. Now. Michael's heart raced frantically. I don't think so, he replied defiantly. We're going to head back to the station and... Before he could finish the sentence, Officer Reeves smashed his powerful fist violently through the partially open window, sending sharp shards of glass flying across the car's interior. In the same swift, brutal motion, he reached in, unlocked the door, and yanked it open forcefully. Michael! Sarah screamed in terror as Officer Torres did the exact same thing on her side. Michael tried desperately to fight back, but Officer Reeves delivered a swift, powerful punch directly to his temple, instantly dazing him. Through blurred, swimming vision, he saw Sarah struggling fiercely with Torres, reaching desperately, futilely, for her purse where the gun was stored. Torres struck her hard across the face, and she slumped limply in her seat, unconscious. "Sarah!" Michael bellowed, lurching forward instinctively as the world spun violently around him. Through the disorienting haze, his eyes locked briefly onto the officer's face, just long enough to notice a distinct, intricate tattoo partially hidden behind the man's ear, along with an old, empty earring hole on his earlobe, and another small scar where a brow piercing had once clearly been. Then Reeves struck again, a heavy, crushing blow to the back of Michael's head. The ground seemed to tilt crazily beneath him as darkness surged in rapidly, overwhelming his senses. The very last thing he felt was the rough, urgent tug of strong hands dragging him forcibly from the car, his limbs suddenly heavy, limp, utterly useless, refusing to respond to silent, desperate commands to fight back. When Michael slowly regained consciousness, his senses returned sluggishly, one by one. First came the relentless, throbbing pain radiating through his head, then the distinct, unpleasant smell of dust and damp mildew, followed shortly by the stark awareness that he was lying uncomfortably on a hard, unyielding surface. His wrists and ankles were tightly bound with something coarse that cut painfully into his skin whenever he tried to move. He forced his heavy eyes open, blinking rapidly until his vision cleared enough to take in his grim surroundings. He was in what appeared to be a dilapidated, old shack, lying precariously on a rusted metal bed frame fitted with a thin, badly stained mattress. Faint light filtered weakly in through a single small, grimy window, illuminating countless dust particles floating lazily in the still air. Through the window, he could just make out a desolate landscape of towering red cliffs, meandering rivers, and dense, untamed bushland, unmistakably the remote Kimberley region, but clearly located far, far away from Darby. Michael tested his restraints again, only to find that they tightened agonizingly with each slight movement. He wisely stopped struggling and instead called out tentatively, his voice hoarse and weak. "Hello? Is anyone there? Sarah?" There was no response, no sound, no sign whatsoever of his wife anywhere within the confines of the small, primitive shack. Raw fear for her safety sent a powerful surge of adrenaline coursing through him, and he called out again, much louder this time, desperation coloring his tone. "Whoever you are, show yourselves. Where's my wife?" The shack door creaked open slowly, ominously, and 3 men stepped deliberately inside. 2 of them were immediately recognizable as the imposter police officers, Reeves and Torres, now clad in worn, faded leather vests emblazoned with a menacing logo Michael didn't recognize. Reeves had noticeably reinserted his earrings, one in his lobe and another through his brow, giving him an even more overtly menacing edge. Standing imposingly between them was a towering, heavily built man with arms and neck extensively inked in elaborate, intricate tattoos. His completely bald head caught the faint, ambient light as he surveyed the small room with cold, calculating intensity. "Finally awake, are we?" the tattooed man said, his voice surprisingly soft, almost gentle for his intimidating physical appearance. "You've got a hard head, Mr. Miller. Torres here was actually worried he'd hit you a bit too hard. Where's my wife?" Michael demanded again immediately, straining futilely against his tight bonds. "And my children? What have you done with them?" The tattooed man laughed, a short, sharp sound utterly devoid of any genuine humor. Straight to the point. "I like that. Your wife, she's safe. For now. As for your children, well, that's a considerably longer story. You're not police," Michael spat, glaring defiantly at Reeves and Torres. "You're the bikers Kevin mentioned, aren't you? The drug smugglers." "Such ugly, unpleasant labels," the tattooed man said dismissively, shaking his head slightly. "We prefer to think of ourselves simply as businessmen, operating, let's say, outside the constraints of conventional regulations." "What's your name?" Michael asked, trying desperately to gather as much information as possible, clinging to any sliver of hope. If you're going to kill me, I'd at least like to know who's responsible. The man paused thoughtfully for a moment, then gave a casual, indifferent shrug. Fair enough. Name's Blades, he said, nodding curtly toward his companions. You've already met Reeves and Torres. They just did what they had to do to get you here quietly. A little dress-up never hurt anyone, right? Reeves added with a smirk. Everyone loves a little cosplay. Why am I here? Michael asked, though he suspected, deep down, he already knew the answer. Blades pulled up a rickety wooden chair and sat down deliberately, facing Michael directly. You're here, Mr. Miller, because you simply couldn't leave well enough alone. We left you a very clear, unambiguous message at your home, yet you still headed straight to the police station. That shows a truly remarkable lack of self-preservation, wouldn't you agree? Kevin Riley told you I was asking questions, Michael guessed bitterly. Blades nodded confirmation, called us the very minute you left his place. Terrified clean out of his mind. Said you knew everything about the whole operation from 12 years ago and were planning to go straight to the police. Kevin's always been a good boy, fundamentally. Knows exactly when to talk and, more importantly, when to stay quiet. What happened to my children? Michael asked again, his voice breaking despite his desperate efforts to remain strong, to maintain some semblance of composure. I need to know. Blade stood abruptly, beginning to pace the small, confined space restlessly. That's not really relevant anymore, is it? What truly matters now is what happens next. He turned sharply to Reeves and Torres. Get the supplies from the truck. It's time we clean up this irritating loose end. As the two men exited the shack, Blades leaned closer conspiratorially toward Michael. You know, you could have had a comfortable life. Kept the drugs we so generously left you, sold them quietly, made enough money to finally stop your wife from having to slave away in that restaurant. But no, you had to be noble, didn't you? Had to play the hero. Where's my wife? Michael repeated stubbornly, raw fear for Sarah now completely overriding everything else, even his own imminent peril. Blade straightened up just as Reeves and Torres returned, each now carrying a large red plastic gallon container. The sharp, acrid smell of gasoline instantly filled the small shack as they began methodically pouring the flammable liquid all around the perimeter, thoroughly soaking the dry wooden walls and floor. What were you doing? Michael asked, sheer panic finally rising uncontrollably in his chest. Stop! Stop it! Blades casually pulled a small remote control from his pocket and pressed a button. A small, dusty television set tucked away in the corner of the room, which Michael hadn't even noticed before, flickered abruptly to life, displaying grainy, indistinct CCTV footage of a stark, unfamiliar room. Inside were three women, two young adults, and one visibly older woman. It took Michael a heart-stopping moment to recognize them. Sarah, and what must be his daughters, Emily and Jessica, though they were now grown women, their faces etched with hardship and fear. Emily, Jessica, Michael gasped aloud, tears instantly springing to his eyes at the unbelievable sight of his daughters, alive, after all these long, agonizing years. Consider this my parting gift to you, Blades said sardonically, motioning dismissively toward the flickering screen. One last look at them before you're gone. We'll take care of them properly once we've finished with you out here. Trust me, no one's coming for you. No one to hear you scream. And certainly no police for hundreds of kilometers, with nothing but desolate ocean in between. Reeves and Torres finished dousing the shack thoroughly with gasoline, even soaking the thin mattress directly beneath Michael. They stepped back outside quickly while Blades remained momentarily, taking a simple disposable lighter from his pocket. Any last words, Mr. Miller? Blades asked casually, flipping the lighter open and closed with practiced ease. Michael stared intently at the screen, at his captive family, a fierce, newfound determination suddenly hardening within him. You won't get away with this, he vowed, his voice low but steady. Blades laughed again, that same cold, humorless sound. We already have. For 12 long years. He flicked the lighter expertly, producing a small, bright flame, and then casually tossed it onto the gasoline-soaked floor. Fire erupted instantly, racing hungrily along the trail of fuel. Blade stepped quickly outside, closing the flimsy door firmly behind him, leaving Michael bound helplessly to the bed as hungry flames began to rapidly climb the dry wooden walls of the shack. The heat intensified rapidly as the flames engulfed the small shack. Michael's eyes watered uncontrollably from the thickening, acrid smoke, but he could still clearly see the television screen showing his family. They were alive. Sarah, Emily, and Jessica were alive, held captive somewhere nearby. The profound knowledge, the sheer miracle of it, gave him a sudden, unexpected surge of renewed strength. He had to survive. He absolutely had to escape, somehow to save them. He twisted violently against his restraints again, deliberately ignoring the searing pain as the rough material cut deeply into his already raw skin. The fire was spreading much faster than he'd anticipated. Flames were already licking eagerly at the foot of the old metal bed frame. Soon, the thin mattress itself would catch fire, and he would be burned alive. Michael scanned the area immediately around him, frantically, desperately searching for anything at all that might possibly help him. His desperate gaze landed on a single rusted nail protruding hazardously from one of the rough wooden posts near the bed. If he could just maneuver himself close enough, perhaps he could use it to fray the ropes binding him. With a grunt of sheer effort, Michael managed to shift his body awkwardly, inching slowly, painfully toward the crucial post. The intense heat was rapidly becoming unbearable. Sweat poured profusely down his face, stinging his eyes mercilessly. He finally reached the nail and began rubbing the rope binding his right wrist vigorously against its rough, sharp edge, working as quickly as humanly possible. The smoke grew thicker and thicker, forcing Michael to keep his head low to the floor, searching for cleaner air. His lungs burned agonizingly with each ragged breath, and his vision began to blur alarmingly at the edges. Still, he continued sawing relentlessly at the rope, feeling it gradually, agonizingly slowly, weaken against the nail's persistent friction. Come on, he gasped aloud, redoubling his frantic efforts as the fire finally spread to the mattress directly beneath him. The worn material began to smolder ominously, and Michael knew instinctively he had only seconds left before it burst fully into flames. Finally, mercifully, the rope frayed enough for him to wrench his right hand free with a final, desperate tug. He immediately began working frantically on the complicated knot binding his other wrist, his fingers clumsy, numb, and slick with sweat. The knot finally loosened, and his left hand came free just as hungry flames caught the edge of the mattress, erupting upwards. Michael quickly untied the ropes binding his ankles, then rolled swiftly off the burning bed onto the relative safety of the floor, where the smoke was slightly less dense. He crawled rapidly toward the door, but found it securely locked or barred from the outside, just as he'd feared. The small window was his only remaining option, his only sliver of hope. Narrow, but possibly just large enough for him to squeeze through if he was lucky. He staggered unsteadily to his feet, coughing violently as he inadvertently inhaled more thick, choking smoke. The fire had already consumed most of the shack's cramped interior, leaving him only a perilously narrow path to the window. He grabbed the rickety wooden chair Blades had sat in earlier and smashed it forcefully against the window, shattering the dirty glass pane. Using the broken chair leg, he quickly cleared the remaining jagged shards from the frame. Michael prepared to climb out, but a sudden, violent explosion of flame from the fully engulfed mattress sent him stumbling forward heavily, his jacket instantly catching fire. Michael shouted aloud in agony, desperately trying to pat out the spreading flames as they quickly ignited his pants as well. He lunged blindly for the window, cutting his hands and arms severely on the remaining glass shards as he forced his upper body through the dangerously narrow opening. "Help!" he shouted weakly, his voice thin and rasping from the smoke inhalation. "Somebody please help me." The rest of his body was still trapped inside the furiously burning shack, the intense heat searing his legs even as he struggled desperately to wriggle completely through the window frame. His strength was rapidly failing him, his consciousness slipping away alarmingly fast from the combined effects of smoke inhalation and excruciating pain. Just as Michael was about to give up, succumbing to the inevitable darkness, he felt strong hands suddenly gripping his shoulders firmly, pulling him forcefully from the window's fiery embrace. He tumbled heavily to the ground outside, his clothes still smoldering dangerously. His unexpected rescuer immediately doused him with water, bucket after bucket, until the last of the flames were finally extinguished. Michael rolled weakly onto his back, gulping desperately at the cool, fresh air. Through blurred, tear-filled vision, he gradually made out the figure standing over him. An elderly man with dark, weathered skin and kind, deep-set features, barefoot and dressed simply in worn, practical clothes. Thank you," Michael managed to choke out between painful coughs. The man crouched down beside him, carefully examining Michael's extensive burns with a critical, experienced eye. "Bad burns," he stated matter-of-factly, his English heavily accented but understandable. "Need treatment, proper treatment, or will get infected quickly." Michael struggled painfully to sit up, wincing sharply at the intense pain radiating from his burned skin. Who are you? How did you find me?" "Mahmoud," the man replied simply, pointing a weathered finger to himself. "Indonesian. I saw the fire from far away. Came to help." Michael looked back numbly at the burning shack, now fully engulfed in roaring flames, already beginning to collapse inwards. "Those men, they have my family, my wife and my daughters. I need to find them." Mahmoud shook his head firmly. "First, we treat burns. If wounds turn black, start to ooze, then infection comes fast. Then you die. And if you die," he added with stark, simple logic, "family never know you even tried." The undeniable truth of this penetrated Michael's panic-stricken haze. He nodded weakly, allowing Mahmoud to help him carefully to his feet and guide him slowly toward an old, beat-up pickup truck parked a short distance away, partially hidden in the dense scrub. As they drove away from the burning wreckage of the shack, Michael noticed they were indeed deep within the vast, unforgiving Kimberley wilderness, surrounded on all sides by imposing red cliffs and seemingly endless stretches of low, scrubby bushland. They were undeniably far from Derby, possibly even stranded on one of the countless remote islands or isolated peninsulas that dotted the rugged Kimberley coastline. Where are we going?" Michael asked, each word painful in his smoke-damaged throat. "River," Mahmoud replied simply. "Clean water. Good for burns." Michael wanted desperately to protest, to insist they immediately begin searching for his family, but he knew, deep down, that Mahmoud was right. He wouldn't be able to help anyone effectively in his current weakened, injured condition. Better to recover some strength first, treat the burns, then figure out a viable plan. They drove for about 15 minutes before finally reaching a small clearing near a gently flowing river. The water looked remarkably clean and invitingly cool, a truly welcome sight to Michael's burning, agonized skin. Mahmoud helped him carefully from the truck and down the gently sloping bank to the river's edge. "Soak in water," Mahmoud instructed patiently. "I make medicine." Michael carefully waded into the river, sighing with immense relief as the cool, soothing water covered his burned skin. He remained there, gratefully, while Mahmoud busied himself gathering various materials from the surrounding bushland. Fresh eucalyptus leaves, which he crushed skillfully between his strong hands, and strips of bark from a nearby tea tree. Using dry kindling collected meticulously from around the clearing, Mahmoud expertly started a small, controlled fire and began preparing some kind of traditional ointment, carefully mixing ash from the fire with the crushed plant materials. As Michael soaked his painful burns, he studied his unlikely savior intently. "Why are you helping me?" he asked finally, his voice still rough. "You said you're Indonesian. You're clearly not from around here." Mahmoud continued his work methodically, grinding the mixture with practiced, efficient hands. "I traffic drug," he admitted quietly, looking up briefly to meet Michael's surprised eyes. Long time ago. That makes me evil, man, yes? Your children, the boy one, he died. These men, they killed him. Push him off high cliff. He pointed vaguely toward a distant, imposing cliff face overlooking the river. River has lots of crocodile there. Heard stories. He paused, his expression somber. You are the father. Maybe saving you restores a little bit of balance. A little bit of good. Michael stared at him, stunned, fresh waves of shock and profound grief washing over him anew. David, they had killed David. Mahmoud nodded solemnly, confirming the terrible truth. Long time ago. I see it happen. I not stop it. This is my punishment now. You were involved in the drug trafficking? Michael asked, struggling to make sense of the connection between this seemingly kind man and the ruthless Blades and his men. For a long time, yes. Your son and his friend, they helped, Mahmoud confirmed sadly. My country, they wanted me dead. Death penalty there. Cannot return. This was not my plan. I stopped traffic drug long ago. But the drug men, they searched for me. Wanted me dead too. I hide. Very long time. Michael stepped slowly out of the cool river, his mind racing frantically now. How did you know I was here? Did you just happen to see the fire? Mahmoud began carefully applying his prepared ointment to a strip of clean cloth he produced. Other boy, the friend, longtime friend, he called me. Asked for help. I lived here, quiet on island other side. Saw smoke, saw fire. Got you some river water. Help. Kevin called you? Michael asked incredulously. But he's the one who told Blades I knew about the drugs. Mahmoud nodded slowly as he began gently treating Michael's burns, carefully dabbing the soothing ointment onto the worst areas and wrapping them securely in the clean cloth strips. Yes. He afraid. Very afraid. Told bad men about you. Then feel bad. Call me. Ask me watch for you. Michael hissed involuntarily as the ointment stung his raw skin, but the initial pain quickly gave way to a welcome, cooling sensation. So Kevin betrayed me to save himself, Michael summarized bitterly. Then try to help me out of guilt? People complicated, Mahmoud said simply, shrugging slightly. Do bad things. Then sometimes try do good things. As Mahmoud finished expertly treating the burns, Michael's thoughts turned urgently back to his captured family. Seeing them on that flickering screen, older, worn, but unmistakably his Sarah, his Emily, his Jessica, had reignited a desperate hope he'd thought long extinguished, buried under years of grief and alcohol. But Mahmoud had also confirmed the devastating truth. David was dead, brutally murdered by the traffickers, his young body callously disposed of in the crocodile-infested river below. The crushing grief of that knowledge warred fiercely within him against the desperate, overwhelming need to save the rest of his precious family. Mahmoud, Michael said, his voice steady now despite the lingering pain and fresh grief. I need to find my wife and daughters. Do you know where Blades might be keeping them? Mahmoud carefully packed away his remaining supplies into a worn canvas bag. Yes, hidden place. Old cattle farm, out on Mitchell Plateau. They keep drugs there. And people too. We need to go there. Michael insisted urgently. Now, Mahmoud shook his head decisively. Not with car. Too dangerous. They have many guns, many men watching. We walk. Through bush. Hidden. Then you call police. He held up a slightly battered satellite phone that Michael hadn't noticed before. I stole this long time ago. Maybe now is time to use it. Michael nodded, understanding the inherent wisdom of stealth over a suicidal frontal assault. He was certainly in no condition to fight anyone, and Blades clearly had numerous heavily armed men at his disposal. Their best, perhaps only, chance was to locate his family first, confirm their whereabouts, then call on the authorities. Let's go, Michael said, rising determinedly to his feet despite the sharp pain from his burns and the heavy weight of grief from learning about David's brutal fate. A fierce, unwavering resolve had taken firm hold of him. He would save what remained of his fractured family, or he would die trying. Mahmoud drove the pickup truck as far as he dared, navigating rough, barely discernible back trails through the dense, unforgiving Kimberley bushland. Eventually, he pulled the truck carefully into a hidden, narrow gully, expertly concealing it beneath low, overhanging branches. "We walk from here," he whispered, gesturing for Michael to follow him silently. "Stay low. Stay quiet." Michael nodded grimly, his treated burns still throbbing painfully, but now manageable thanks to Mahmoud's skillful care. They set off immediately on foot, moving cautiously, deliberately through the dense, scrubby terrain. The relentless afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, but Michael barely noticed the oppressive heat, his mind focused entirely, singularly, on the critical mission ahead. After about an hour of slow, painstaking progress, they finally reached the edge of a large clearing. Crouching low behind a natural cluster of large rocks, Mahmoud pointed silently toward a sprawling compound visible in the distance. A collection of weathered, run-down buildings surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. From their concealed vantage point, Michael could clearly see several armed men patrolling the perimeter, rifles slung casually across their backs. "Old cattle station," Mahmoud explained in a low whisper. "They use for drug hideout. Very remote place, where police not come easily." Michael studied the layout intently, trying desperately to determine which specific building might be housing his captive family. "How many men do they have?" he whispered back. "Maybe 15? 20? Mahmoud replied uncertainly. "Too many for us." Michael knew instinctively he was right. They would absolutely need help. Significant help. "Let me use your phone," he requested urgently. Mahmoud handed over the satellite phone without hesitation, and Michael quickly dialed the emergency number for the Western Australia Police. When the operator finally answered, he identified himself rapidly and quickly, concisely explained the desperate situation, the kidnapping, the extensive drug operation, and the precise location of the compound. To his immense surprise, the operator informed him calmly that a full-scale search and rescue operation had already been mobilized. "We received an anonymous tip approximately 30 minutes ago, sir, from a man identifying himself as Kevin Riley," she explained professionally. "Multiple units are already en route to your estimated location now." Michael was stunned into momentary silence. Kevin had not only warned Mahmoud, but had also directly contacted the authorities himself. Perhaps there was more to the young man, more courage than Michael had initially given him credit for. He shared their precise current location with the operator, who instructed them firmly to remain hidden until the police arrived on scene. "They're approaching with extreme caution, sir," she advised calmly. "The trafficking operation is believed to be heavily armed and dangerous." Just as Michael ended the call, sudden movement down at the compound immediately caught his attention. A small group of men were emerging rapidly from one of the main buildings, roughly escorting 3 female figures toward a waiting jeep parked nearby. Even from this considerable distance, Michael instantly recognized his wife and daughters. His heart leaped painfully at the sight of them, alive and walking, but plummeted just as quickly as he realized with horror that they were being taken away, moved somewhere else. "They're moving them," he whispered urgently, frantically, to Mahmoud beside him. "We can't wait for the police. We have to do something." Mahmoud peered intently through the dense brush. They put something in jackets and shoes. Drug packages. Michael watched helplessly as one of the armed men roughly handled Sarah, forcing her harshly into the back of the jeep. "They're using them as mules," he realized with sickening certainty. "If they get caught with drugs planted on them, bad men disappear," Mahmoud finished grimly. "Your family end up in prison." Michael couldn't let that happen. Not after everything. Not now. "We need to follow them," he decided instantly. They retreated rapidly back to Mahmoud's hidden truck and set off immediately, taking a rough, parallel route through the bush to avoid being spotted. Michael kept the distant jeep constantly in sight as it traveled quickly along a dusty, unpaved dirt road, heading even deeper into the remote, desolate plateau. Eventually, it stopped abruptly in a small, secluded clearing where another vehicle was already waiting. A large, black SUV with heavily tinted windows. Michael and Mahmoud parked their truck a safe distance away and continued cautiously on foot, creeping stealthily close enough to observe the unfolding situation without being detected themselves. They watched in silent horror as the traffickers forced Sarah, Emily, and Jessica to put on heavy jackets and sturdy shoes, clearly laden with hidden drug packages sewn inside. When Sarah resisted momentarily, one of the brutal men grabbed Jessica roughly by the hair, pressing the cold barrel of a gun firmly against her temple. "Do as we say, or your daughter dies," the man threatened loudly, his menacing voice carrying clearly across the still air, easily audible to Michael. "Your husband is already dead. No one is coming to save you now." Michael clenched his fists tightly, every fiber of his being screaming, urging him to rush forward recklessly and protect his terrified family. But he knew such an impulsive action would be pure suicide and would likely get them all killed instantly. He forced himself, through sheer willpower, to remain hidden, continuing to observe intently as the traffickers prepared efficiently to transfer his captive family into the waiting SUV. Just as the dangerous handoff was about to take place, the distinct, unmistakable sound of approaching helicopter rotors suddenly broke the tense silence. Everyone in the clearing froze instantly, looking nervously skyward. Two police helicopters appeared dramatically over the nearby ridge, one heading directly for their position in the clearing, the other continuing swiftly toward the main compound complex. Chaos erupted immediately. The startled traffickers drew their weapons instinctively, firing wildly, erratically, at the rapidly approaching helicopter while simultaneously scrambling desperately to complete the transfer of their valuable human cargo. Michael saw Blades emerge hastily from the Jeep, shouting frantic orders to his panicked men. Through his satellite phone, still connected, Michael could hear the police operator providing rapid updates. Ground units were converging swiftly on both locations, coordinating closely with the helicopters for a simultaneous pincer movement raid. "They're taking my family," Michael shouted urgently into the phone as one of Blade's remaining men began roughly herding Sarah, Emily, and Jessica toward a third vehicle, a battered utility truck, that suddenly appeared at the far edge of the clearing. The police, heavily engaged in the intense firefight with the main group of traffickers, seemed completely unaware that the three hostages were being surreptitiously spirited away under the cover of the chaos. Michael made a split-second, critical decision. "Mahmoud, we need to block that truck. It's our only chance." Mahmoud nodded instantly, understanding immediately. They raced back quickly to his pickup truck, and Mahmoud gunned the engine forcefully, driving straight out into the chaotic clearing. He swerved expertly around the ongoing gunfight between the police and the remaining traffickers, aiming directly for the utility truck that was just about to carry away Michael's family forever. The aging pickup slammed hard into the side of the truck, just as the struggling trafficker was attempting to force Emily into the back seat. The powerful impact knocked the surprised man completely off balance, giving Michael the precious opportunity he needed to leap from Mahmoud's moving vehicle and tackle the man fiercely to the dusty ground. They struggled violently, the trafficker's superior strength and desperation nearly overwhelming Michael, but 12 long years of accumulated grief, rage, and now fierce paternal determination fueled Michael's desperate efforts. He finally managed to pin the man down, landing punch after furious punch until his opponent finally went limp beneath him. "Dad!" A trembling, hesitant voice broke through Michael's adrenaline-fueled fury. He looked up, dazed, to see Emily staring at him, her eyes wide with utter disbelief and burgeoning hope. "Emily!" he gasped, scrambling hastily to his feet and pulling his eldest daughter tightly into his arms. She felt so different, so much older than the young woman etched vividly in his memories, taller, thinner, harder somehow, yet unmistakably, miraculously, his child. Jessica was next, rushing forward eagerly to join the tearful embrace. "Is it really you?" she sobbed uncontrollably, clinging tightly to him as if afraid he might disappear again. "I'm here," Michael assured them both, tears streaming freely down his own face now. "I'm here now." He looked around urgently for Sarah, expecting her to join their emotional reunion. Instead, His eyes fell upon her slumped figure leaning heavily against the side of the truck, a dark, ominous stain spreading rapidly across the front of her shirt. One of the stray bullets fired wildly during the chaotic gunfight at the helicopter had tragically found her. "Sarah!" Michael cried out in anguish, rushing desperately to his wife's side. He cradled her gently in his arms, pressing his hand firmly against the bleeding wound in a futile, desperate attempt to stop the life draining out of her. Sarah's eyes fluttered open weakly, focusing on his face with visible effort. "Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible, You found them." "I found all of you," he corrected her, his own voice breaking with overwhelming emotion. "Hold on, Sarah. Please hold on. Help is coming." But the light was already fading rapidly from her eyes. Take care of our girls," she murmured, her hand weakly squeezing his one last time. Her final breath escaped in a soft, gentle sigh, her body suddenly going limp, heavy in Michael's arms. He howled in raw, primal anguish, a heartbreaking sound of utter loss that carried starkly across the clearing, momentarily drowning out the receding sounds of gunfire and helicopter rotors. Emily and Jessica rushed frantically to their mother's side, their own heartbroken cries joining Michael's as the devastating reality of losing her in the very moment of their miraculous reunion crashed down heavily upon them all. Mahmoud, who had quickly secured the unconscious trafficker Michael had fought, now stood stoically nearby, guarding the grieving family, his weathered face etched with solemn understanding. Around them, the police operation continued efficiently. More officers arrived rapidly, apprehending the surviving, demoralized traffickers. Medical personnel rushed forward to treat the wounded. Through a thick, disorienting haze of profound grief, Michael was vaguely aware of someone gently trying to pull him away from Sarah's lifeless body, of distant voices asking questions he couldn't possibly process or comprehend at that moment. All he could focus on were his daughters, the precious children he had believed lost forever, now miraculously returned to him at the exact, cruel moment he had lost their mother forever. The brutal, unfair symmetry of it all felt utterly unbearable. Yet somehow, he knew he had to bear it. For them, for Emily and Jessica, and for Sarah's memory. Mahmoud gently helped shepherd the distraught girls towards safety as the police continued to secure the chaotic area. Michael followed, numbly behind them in a daze, his wife's warm blood still wet, sticky, on his trembling hands, his mind struggling desperately to reconcile the overwhelming joy of finding his daughters alive with the crushing agony of losing Sarah. As they were led slowly toward a designated safe area away from the ongoing police operation, Michael held his daughters close, one under each arm, their family forever altered, fractured, yet somehow, partially, miraculously, restored. They had survived. They were together again. And somehow, someday, they would find a way to move forward, carrying Sarah forever deep within their hearts. The police force swarmed the clearing efficiently, securing the entire site with practiced, military precision. Michael watched numbly as officers clad in tactical gear expertly handcuffed Blades and his remaining associates, leading them firmly toward waiting transport vehicles. Some would be taken away immediately by helicopter, others transported by boat back to the mainland to face justice. A kind-faced female officer gently wrapped a thick shock blanket around Michael's trembling shoulders, guiding him softly toward a temporary medical station that had been hastily set up nearby. His daughters were already there, being carefully examined by attentive paramedics. They looked up anxiously when he approached, their faces still streaked with dried tears and fresh grief. "Dad," Emily called out softly, reaching a hand toward him. At 34, she had grown into a striking woman possessing her mother's serious, thoughtful eyes and determined chin. 12 long years of unimaginable captivity had clearly hardened her, yet there was still something undeniably recognizable of the bright, serious 22-year-old girl he remembered so vividly. Jessica, now 32, sat quietly beside her sister, her hands clutching tightly a small paper cup of water that trembled uncontrollably with her suppressed emotions. She had been just 20, barely more than a child herself, when she had disappeared. Now she was a grown woman who had endured unimaginable horrors, traumas Michael could only begin to fathom. A uniformed medic approached Michael then to examine his burns more closely. Someone treated these already, the woman noted with professional curiosity, gently probing the bandaged areas. Who did this? Michael looked around suddenly, scanning the busy area for Mahmoud, abruptly realizing he hadn't seen the quiet Indonesian man since they had reached the relative safety of the medical station. There was a man, an Indonesian man. He saved my life, treated my burns. Where is he? The medic shook her head apologetically. I haven't seen anyone matching that description around here, sir. Let me ask around for you. As she moved away to inquire, a senior police officer approached Michael purposefully. Mr. Miller? I'm Superintendent Harper. I'll need to ask you a few questions, sir, but only when you feel up to it. Michael nodded wearily. My wife, Sarah, her body, is being treated with all due respect, sir. Harper assured him gently but firmly. We'll arrange transport back to Derby for all of you as soon as the medical team clears you to travel. Just then, Michael noticed several officers leading a handcuffed man toward one of the waiting helicopters. It was Mahmoud. His head was bowed low, his wrists secured tightly behind his back. Wait, Michael called out urgently, struggling painfully to his feet again. That man, he saved my life. Where are you taking him? Superintendent Harper placed a firm but gentle restraining hand on Michael's arm. That's Mahmoud Rajasa, Mr. Miller. He's been on Indonesia's most wanted list for well over 15 years now. A major international drug trafficker who fled to Australia years ago to escape the death penalty in his home country. We've been actively looking for him for a very long time. But he saved me. Michael protested vehemently. He helped me find my family. And we will certainly take that significant mitigating factor into full consideration, sir, Harper promised gravely. But he is still a wanted criminal who needs to face justice for his past actions. He'll be deported back to Indonesia shortly to stand trial there. Michael knew exactly what that meant. Indonesia's strict drug laws were among the harshest in the entire world, with major trafficking offenses carrying a mandatory death sentence. The very man who had bravely saved him from burning alive, who had helped reunite him with his daughters, would now likely be executed for his past crimes. Before Michael could argue further, protest the inherent injustice, one of the paramedics approached them again. We're ready to transport your family to Derby Hospital now. Mr. Miller, she announced calmly. The medical helicopter is standing by. Michael reluctantly allowed himself to be led toward the waiting helicopter, his daughters following closely, silently, behind him. As they were lifted steadily into the air, Michael watched the vast, rugged landscape of the Mitchell Plateau rapidly recede below them. Somewhere down there, lost in that unforgiving wilderness, David's earthly remains had been scattered unceremoniously all those years ago, likely feeding the numerous crocodiles inhabiting the Kimberley River. They would never be able to give him a proper burial now, never truly be able to say goodbye properly. The long flight back to Derby passed in a painful, indistinct blur of overwhelming grief, physical pain, and sheer emotional exhaustion. At the hospital, Michael and his daughters were temporarily separated for individual medical treatment. His extensive burns required further specialized care, and the girls needed comprehensive medical examinations and psychological evaluations after their prolonged, traumatic captivity. Hours later, they were finally reunited in a private room, thankfully arranged by the police. Michael sat quietly in a chair positioned between his daughters' beds, holding a hand of each gently as they slept, heavily sedated by doctors concerned about their fragile psychological state. He hadn't been able to speak with them properly yet. Not really, hadn't had a chance to hear their full story or tell them his. That would have to come later, gradually, when they were all stronger, more stable. A soft knock at the door roused him eventually from his somber vigil. Superintendent Harper entered quietly, accompanied by another uniformed officer. Mr. Miller, Harper said softly, mindful of the sleeping young women nearby. "We need to take your formal statement now, if you feel up to it." Michael carefully disengaged his hands from his daughter's sleeping grips and followed the officers silently down the quiet hospital corridor to a small, sterile consultation room. There, over the next hour, he recounted everything that had transpired. His fateful encounter with Kevin Riley, the shocking discovery of the planted drugs in his home, the terrifying kidnapping by the fake police officers, his miraculous rescue by Mahmoud, and finally, the deadly confrontation at the clearing that had resulted in Sarah's tragic death. "What about Detective Marr?" Michael asked finally, when he had finished his harrowing account. "I tried to contact him when all this started yesterday." "Where is he now?" Harper and the other officer exchanged significant glances. "Detective Marr resigned abruptly from the force 3 years ago, Mr. Miller," Harper explained carefully. "There was an ongoing internal investigation at the time into serious allegations of negligence and possible corruption in several of his major cases, including, unfortunately, your children's initial disappearance investigation. He left before the investigation was fully completed." Are you saying he was involved with Blades? With the trafficking operation?" Michael demanded, horrified by the implication. "Is that why our children's case went cold so quickly?" "We can't definitively confirm that just yet, sir," Harper stated cautiously. "But given these recent, dramatic events, we are immediately reopening all of Marr's old cases for thorough review. If he was indeed compromised, rest assured, we will find the evidence." Michael sat back heavily in his chair, struggling to process this stunning new betrayal. If Marr had been corrupt, if he had deliberately, knowingly sabotaged the initial investigation all those years ago, perhaps to protect Blades' criminal operation, then he was undeniably partially responsible for the 12 long years of unrelenting hell his family had endured. "What about Kevin Riley?" Michael asked then, his voice flat. "He's the one who set me up in the first place, told Blades I knew about the operation." Mr. Riley turned himself involuntarily at the Derby police station first thing this morning, Harper informed him calmly. "He's been cooperating fully ever since, providing extremely valuable information about the entire trafficking network. In fact, he's the one who ultimately alerted us to your kidnapping yesterday and gave us the precise location of the compound." Michael felt deeply conflicted. Kevin had undoubtedly betrayed him directly to Blades, leading to his capture and near death. Yet, he had also demonstrably tried to save him afterward by contacting both Mahmoud and the police. I want to speak with him," Michael decided firmly. "That can certainly be arranged, Mr. Miller," Harper agreed readily. "But not tonight. You need rest. And we need to finish processing all the suspects we've already arrested today." Michael returned slowly to his daughter's hospital room, his mind still spinning wildly with all he had learned in the past 24 hours. He settled back into the uncomfortable chair position between their beds, resuming his vigil, keeping watch as they slept peacefully, irrationally afraid they might somehow disappear again if he dared to close his own eyes for even a moment. Eventually, sheer exhaustion finally overcame him, and he drifted off into an uneasy, troubled sleep, filled with vivid, disturbing dreams of burning shacks, menacing crocodile-infested rivers, and Sarah's beloved face as the last spark of life had faded irrevocably from her eyes. The following morning, Michael and his daughters were moved to a more comfortable, private room at the Derby Hospital. The police had thoughtfully arranged for a specialized trauma psychologist to be present when the girls felt ready to talk about their harrowing 12-year ordeal. As they ate a simple breakfast provided silently by the hospital staff, an awkward, palpable silence hung heavy between them, the vast chasm created by 12 long years of forced separation proving difficult for any of them to bridge initially. "I still can't believe you found us," Emily finally said softly, breaking the strained silence. We'd given up hope completely, years and years ago." Michael sat down beside her bed, putting down his untouched coffee cup. "I never stopped looking," he told her honestly, his voice thick with emotion. "Not really. Even when everyone else, even the police, said you were gone forever, something deep inside me just couldn't accept it." Jessica, who had barely spoken a word since the dramatic rescue, looked up slowly from her untouched toast. Mom. Mom never gave up either, did she? Michael's throat tightened painfully. Never, he confirmed softly. She kept working, kept going day after day because she had to believe, had to hope you were still out there somewhere. And now she's gone, Jessica whispered, fresh tears welling instantly in her eyes. Just when we finally found each other again. Michael moved quickly to sit on the edge of Jessica's bed, gathering his youngest daughter gently into his arms as she began to sob heartbrokenly. Emily joined them immediately, the three of them clinging tightly to each other, united in their shared profound grief. When they had finally composed themselves somewhat, Superintendent Harper arrived as promised, accompanied by the psychologist, a gentle-voiced, compassionate woman named Dr. Winters. If you're ready, Harper said gently, we'd like to hear your story now. The girls exchanged hesitant glances, then nodded slowly in unison. With Dr. Winters present to provide emotional support and guidance, they slowly, painfully, began to recount the horrifying events of that fateful day 12 long years ago. We were sailing out to Hidden Reef Cay that day, Emily began, her voice low but steady. It was supposed to be just a fun day out, you know? Swimming, sunbathing. David seemed strange, though, once we anchored. Kind of agitated. He disappeared for a little while, and Jessica and I went looking for him. We found him on the other side of the quay, Jessica continued, her voice trembling slightly. He was with these men, handing them a package. When they saw us watching, David tried to get us to leave quickly, tried to act normal, but they were immediately suspicious. Emily picked up the narrative again, her expression hardening slightly at the memory. They demanded to know who we were. David said we were just his sisters, that we didn't know anything about anything, but they were clearly paranoid. One of them was obviously high on something. They started arguing amongst themselves about what to do with us. David tried to protect us, Jessica added, her voice breaking again. When one of them grabbed me, David fought back. That's when Emily hesitated, taking a deep breath. That's when one of them stabbed him. Michael closed his eyes tightly, the sharp pain of hearing about his only son's violent final moments almost unbearable. They dragged us all onto their boat. Emily continued after a long, heavy pause, regaining some composure. David, he was still alive then, bleeding badly. We begged them, pleaded with them to get him help, but they just ignored us. They took us all to a remote spot up on the Kimberly River. She faltered again, unable to continue. They threw him into the river. Jessica finished starkly, her voice hollow, devoid of emotion now. He was still alive when they did it. We saw the crocodiles. Dr. Winters quickly offered tissues as both young women wept openly at the horrific memory. Michael fought back his own tears fiercely, needing desperately to hear the rest of their story, needing to understand the full extent of their suffering. After that, they drugged us. Emily resumed once she had regained some measure of control. We woke up far inland, at a different location entirely, not the one where you found us. Over the years, they moved us around constantly, a lot, always to extremely remote places deep in the Kimberly region. Eventually, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we ended up at that cattle station compound. They used us as drug mules, Jessica explained flatly. We'd have packages hidden in our clothing, sometimes sewn directly into our luggage. Then they'd take us to various handoff points, usually small airstrips or remote beaches. No one ever suspected 2 young women would be carrying large quantities of drugs. If we ever refused or even talked about trying to escape, they'd hurt one of us badly, just to punish the other, Emily added quietly, her voice filled with remembered fear. Once they threw another girl, another captive, off the same high cliff where they disposed of David, just to show us they would actually do it. Another captive? Superintendent Harper asked sharply, making quick notes. Emily nodded grimly. Yes, there were others over the years. Some managed to escape, we think. Some died from illness or accidents. Some just disappeared one day. Did you ever see an Indonesian man named Mahmud Rajesh at the compound? Harper inquired pointedly. Yes, sometimes, but mostly in the early years, Jessica confirmed thoughtfully. He seemed different from the others somehow. Less cruel, maybe? He stopped coming around altogether maybe 5 or 6 years ago. We heard the others talking once, saying they were looking for him, that he'd betrayed them somehow. Michael thought again of Mahmoud, now facing almost certain extradition and a likely death sentence back in Indonesia. The man had clearly tried to atone, in his own way, for his past involvement in the horrific operation by saving Michael's life. What about Detective Marr? Michael asked urgently. Did you ever see him? With these people? At the compound? The girls exchanged another quick, uncertain look. No, Emily answered carefully after a moment's thought. But we did hear them mention a friend at the station several times over the years. Someone high up who made sure no one ever looked too closely at their operation. Harper made another significant note. That's consistent with our existing suspicions about Marr, he commented grimly. Don't worry, Mr. Miller, we'll find him. As the difficult interview continued, a nurse entered quietly to inform Superintendent Harper that Kevin Riley had arrived at the hospital and was asking insistently to speak with Michael. Bring him in, Michael decided firmly, needing closure. I want to hear what he has to say for himself. Kevin entered the room hesitantly, looking pale, gaunt, and utterly haggard, his hands fidgeting nervously, constantly, at his sides. He faltered visibly when he saw Emily and Jessica sitting up in their beds, raw recognition and overwhelming shame washing clearly over his distraught features. You probably hate me, he said softly, addressing Michael, but unable to meet his gaze. I don't blame you. Why did you do it, Kevin? Michael asked quietly, his voice devoid of accusation now, just filled with weary sadness. Why did you call Blades when I left your place yesterday? Kevin looked down fixedly at his worn shoes. I was terrified, he admitted honestly, his voice barely a whisper. For 12 long years, I've been constantly looking over my shoulder, just waiting for them to finally decide I was too much of a liability. When you showed up yesterday, asking all those questions, I just panicked. You set me up to be killed, Michael stated flatly, the reality still chilling. I know, Kevin admitted miserably. And as soon as I did it, I knew it was wrong. Terribly wrong. That's why I called Mahmoud. I knew he still lived out there, somewhere deep in the bush. Knew he might be able to help, somehow, if he saw what was happening. And then I went straight to the police, he added quickly. Why now? Why finally now, after all these years of silence? Michael pressed gently. Kevin finally looked up then, meeting Michael's steady gaze directly for the first time, his eyes filled with profound remorse. Because I couldn't live with it anymore. Seeing you again yesterday, hearing you talk about your children, it just brought everything flooding back. All the guilt, all the shame I've been trying so desperately to drown out all these years with fishing and isolation. Michael studied the broken man, standing before him for a long moment. Kevin had undeniably been a coward 12 long years ago, choosing his own safety over truth and justice. He'd been a coward again just yesterday, setting Michael up callously to save himself. But ultimately, perhaps pushed by conscience or desperation, he had found some small, belated measure of courage in the end. I'll never forgive you for staying silent all those years, Kevin, Michael told him honestly, his voice heavy with the weight of lost time and unimaginable suffering. But thank you. Thank you for finally doing the right thing. Kevin nodded slowly, silently accepting this painful judgment as he was quietly led away by a waiting police officer. Michael turned back slowly to his daughters, ready at last to hear the remainder of their harrowing story, and ready, finally, to begin the long, arduous process of healing together. The days and weeks that followed brought a whirlwind of intense activity. The comprehensive police raid on the remote trafficking compound yielded massive amounts of crucial evidence, not only directly related to the extensive drug operation itself, but also uncovering a complex, deeply entrenched network of corruption that had successfully protected it for well over a decade. Disgraced former Detective Marr was quickly located living under an assumed name in Perth and promptly arrested. Mahmoud Rajesa, despite Michael's impassioned testimony regarding his heroic, life-saving actions, was indeed extradited swiftly back to Indonesia to face trial. The Australian government, however, did lodge a formal request for clemency with the Indonesian authorities, citing his significant cooperation and direct assistance in rescuing the hostages. Sarah's funeral was held a week after the rescue, attended by what seemed like the entire population of Derby. The very same community that had often whispered judgmentally about Michael's drinking problem for years now rallied protectively around the fractured family, offering overwhelming support, compassion, and practical sympathy. As they stood together at Sarah's graveside, Michael, with a supportive arm wrapped tightly around each of his daughters, he made them a quiet, solemn promise. "I will be the father you deserve now," he vowed softly but firmly. "I will protect you. I will help you rebuild your lives. I will give you anything and everything you need. We just need you, Dad," Emily said simply, leaning her head wearily against his shoulder, her voice thick with emotion. "Sober and present. You have me," Michael assured them both, his voice choked with emotion but unwavering. "Always." Later that evening, back in the suffocating quiet of their home, a home that still bore Sarah's indelible traces in every familiar corner, they sat together somberly in the living room, surrounded by cherished photographs from happier, simpler times. A framed picture of David, laughing heartily, wearing his favorite holiday hat, sat prominently on the mantelpiece. "We should have a proper memorial for him, too," Jessica suggested quietly. "Even without a body, he deserves to be remembered properly." Michael nodded readily. "We will," he agreed. "And for all the others, too. All the others who didn't make it back." As twilight finally settled gently over Derby, the three surviving members of the Miller family held each other close, tightly bound not only by their shared grief and deeply traumatic experiences, but also, more powerfully, by the unbreakable, enduring bonds of family. They had lost so much, 12 precious years together, their beloved David, and now, their cherished Sarah. But somehow, against all odds, they had found each other again. The long road ahead would undoubtedly not be easy. There would inevitably be terrifying nightmares, intensive therapy sessions, stressful court appearances as the complex trafficking case proceeded slowly through the justice system. There would certainly be days when the crushing weight of their collective losses would feel utterly unbearable, suffocating. But there would also be healing, gradual, imperfect, incremental healing, unfolding slowly day by painstaking day. As darkness finally fell completely outside, Michael looked intently at his daughters, seeing them truly as women now. Not the young, innocent faces etched so clearly in his memory, but recognizing in them profound echoes of their mother's unwavering strength, their brother's inherent courage, and something uniquely, resiliently their own, something fierce and determined that had ultimately helped them survive unimaginable, prolonged circumstances. "We'll be okay," he told them softly, his voice filled with newfound conviction. And for the very first time in 12 long, agonizing years, he truly, deeply believed it might actually be true. Thank you for listening to this incredible story of loss, resilience, and the enduring power of family bonds. If you're moved by this story, please consider subscribing to the channel for more compelling narratives like this one. Your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light.